Richard.
Hello, I'm Ross Stagnitti with Canal Town Commentary, a series of Canastota stories that will be archived in the Education Building on Canal Street in Canastota, New York. Today is May 2nd, 2018. I think we've skipped spring. It feels like summer. It's about 80 degrees out here. I'm in the home of Anthony and Ann Pulverenti at 7906 Gee Road in the town of Sullivan, approximately 5 miles northwest of Canastota. I noticed in the 1962 yearbook, I was a freshman at the time, that Anthony Pulverenti indicated that his future ambition was to be a conversationalist. So I said to myself, a perfect person to be interviewed. He wanted to be a conversationalist. But unfortunately, it was an error in the toot. It was a typo. He really wanted to be a conservationist. And although his professional career was spent primarily in the banking business, he remains a true conservationist. More about that later. First of all, I'd like to thank Ann and Anthony for accepting my interview invitation. Originally, Anthony was going to be the only subject of this interview. Ann was a little hesitant. She was kind of over in the corner. But she added so much to the preliminary interview that we've decided to add her to the list. Also, thanks to Ellen, Mark Dunbar, for once again videographing the interview. Anthony, first of all, tell us about this house and the surrounding real estate. We have a great background for this shot today.
Yes. This land that this house is sitting on was Ann's family's property for probably 75 years.
Oh my gosh, at least since the late 19-teens.
Yeah.
So a long time. My father
That's why
planned all
she's here.
those
She
trees.
provides a lot of the dates and background that I've forgotten.
Almost
But-
100 years.
But yes, and it was originally a dairy farm, and it was called Bloss and Jones. This was originally a dairy farm, and then they bought, they parceled it off and bought different pieces of land. The wood barn over here actually was a dairy barn, but they took the top floor out and just put a roof on it. So it's been in her family for a long time.
Now, the Pulverentis have provided us with some photos, and here are just a few. This would be Ann's dad, Jim Segroy, and that photo was taken somewhere just east of here, I would say.
Exactly.
And another photo that caught my attention is this one with Mr. Segroy on the Alice Chalmers. That's the first tractor I ever drove, so I was familiar with some of
And we
these.
still have it.
And it's here and still in use.
The same tractor?
Same tractor.
The old Alice Chalmers.
It's I think it's a 1961, that tractor.
And here's yet another photo of Jimmy Segroy and Sam Denese. The same Sam Denese that ran the store?
The son.
His son. And this, it looks like this photo was taken in the fall of 1990. So that's the Segroy end of things. Now the Pulverentis also were farmers in this area. Can you describe the location of the Pulverenti farms?
Yes. At our peak, we had 3 parcels in this area. And our main operation was on Pine Ridge Road, actually right across from where Mike Patney now lives, that outlook he has there.
Okay, the Conservancy.
The conservative.
Yeah, so you're talking north of here.
Yeah, we were right across the street from him, and of course the land comes down from Pine Ridge Road
Right.
down to the muck, and on the land that's between Pine Ridge Road and the muck is more upland. It's hard land. That's where we used to have our garden. But we had like 5 or 6 acres there, and we were right next to Joe Farnach and the Ponticellos.
Okay.
And on this end, on the western end, it was Kippy Stagnitti. Kippy, I think. Yeah.
That would be my father's cousin.
Yeah, your father's cousin. And so that was one piece we had, and they weren't big. They were like maybe 8-9 acres of land we had there. Then we had another muck farm on the ditch bank just down here, Ditch Bank Road, about halfway between the D Road Bridge and the Pickards Bridge. We had another 5 acres or so there of pure muck, and then on this side of the Quasalone, right behind the land we're sitting on now, we had another, I don't know, 5 or 10 acres there that was mixed land, where we grew. Originally, we used to grow lettuce, carrots, and onions, and we used to grow our little sets there too. Little sets are gone.
Right.
They don't use little
Sure.
sets anymore.
But-
All they plant now is globe onions.
That's
You know,
right.
the seed.
Now here's another photo. This shows Anthony's dad, Salvatore Jr., right?
Right.
Sam Pulverenti. And that photo, you would guess, was how many years old?
Well, he had to be like 20 years old.
So he was born in 1905.
So about 1925.
Now you gotta remember that at that age, he was trucking onions to the Albany market. People talk about responsibility, you know, accountability.
Sure.
Here's a kid from Sicily. He's 20 years old, and he's going alone on trips to Albany, buying onions here and selling at the Albany market.
No throughway.
No throughway either. Can you imagine how long that trip took?
Wow. Unbelievable.
And you know, he had a little 6-gun he carried with him, because in those days, you know, the roads were fraught with treachery. So, but it just kills me, you know, when people talk about, you know, responsibility and kids growing up and this and that. You know, our parents, you know, what hardship they went through.
So he came to the United States from Sicily at what age?
I think he was 8 years old.
Did he come with his parents?
His father, my grandfather, came here first for 2 or 3 years, worked and saved money so that he could send for the rest of his family, which was my father, my uncle Ned, and my grandmother.
Okay.
So they after about 3 years, he had accumulated enough money for them to travel over here. You know?
That's how it was for my grandparents too. My grandfather came maybe 1912 when so many did. And actually I'd heard that he and my grandmother were married by proxy. And then she came here after he had established himself somewhat. So they knew they would never see their parents again. That's a hardship, but that must have been, you know, why it was so tough there, that they would be willing to take the risk. But they always had someone here that they knew from home,
Right.
who would help get them started.
Wow. Yeah. Now we always talk about the Canastota muckland. Technically, none of the mucklands in Canastota. It's not in the village, but most of our parents and grandparents lived in the village during the winter and then spent their summers
Right.
on the muckland. And my parents would always talk about they would spend their summers at the beach.
And we know which one.
The black beach, because the soil was
Our tans were always on the lower back where the shirt would go up from bending over,
right.
and on your forearms. We never got even tans.
Now, who still raises onions in Canastota? I can think of maybe 1 or 2.
There are currently 3 farmers, and they're right here down the road. John Mazzacchio, Senior and Junior. Joe Repazzetti, he's down the Ditch Bank Road West, and on the opposite corner of the bridge here is Louis DeMario had an operation. Of course, he passed away last fall, and his top hand, who's Mark Repazzetti, is continuing.
Okay,
I don't know exactly what the arrangement is, but in fact, they're planting today.
yeah.
They're finishing up because they got, with this April that we had,
Sure.
normally they would be already planted
Right.
by the middle of the month, let alone here they are May 2nd, and they're trying to finish getting their crop in. So it's been a tough spring for them.
Well, here's a photo that was taken kind of around the corner from here. My grandfather had an onion farm off of Tag Road. And I'm going to guess that this photo was taken in the early 1930s, so during the Depression. In fact, that's my father right there, who's leaning on the automobile. I don't know who owned the automobile, but probably wouldn't have been my grandparents. In the background, you see the shanty, which was basically a one-room shack where they lived during the spring and the summer. And my grandparents had 11 children, and so it was tight quarters. But they all have good memories about those days. It's hard work. I mean, that's not kid ourselves.
They must have been neighbors then with Tamarcos and Cervellos.
Yes.
I know they had property down around the corner. And when we used to work in the fields, of course now things are overgrown, but it was fun sometimes because you could look across a field and see people you knew in the next field, cousins, friends.
Right.
The area was so populated with onion farmers and neighbors that it was a real community, real community experience.
Yeah, my fond memories of working on the muck, and there weren't many, but the fond memories would be the friends that you worked with, and you know the jokes you tell. But we all remember what it was like to weed onions, top onions.
Ergo the tan on your back and arms.
Of course, as you get older, you know, you took on more responsibility.
Sure.
You know, first all you did was, you know, weeding or pulling onions or topping onions. But, you know, then eventually as you got older, you could do a little machine work, you know, and that was like being promoted. You know? But you talk about the shanties and the fact that they just occupied them in the summertime. That was mostly true, but I can recall my father telling me that they actually lived in the Pine Ridge shanty for part of the winter. And he said he could lay in his bed and turn his head. That's the only thing he could move was his head because he had so many blankets on him. His mother put so many blankets on him. He could see the light coming through the cracks in the wall.
True.
And he says, when I woke up in the morning, I had like an inch of snow covering the bed when it would blow real hard, you know. But he said he was under so many blankets that he stayed warm.
My father said the same thing. They happened to have a late snow in the spring. He and my Uncle Joe were in their bed, and he said the same thing. The snow came through the crack, and it was on them.
Now, our parents and grandparents lived through the Depression.
Yeah.
What effect did the Depression have on them at the time, and then how did that kind of carry on in later years after the Depression was history?
My feeling about it is that it changed them forever. I mean, they were poor people to begin with, but when they went through the Depression, and you know, regardless of you know how their job, you know, they didn't have any jobs. They had the muck farm, and if they couldn't make a living there, you know, that was the end of it. But it permanently changed them in the sense that they suffered so much that they were like untrusting after that. That you know that they would never leave to fate that their next meal or where they're going to live or this or that. And that's why they became so ultra conservative. Most of them. I can't speak for all of them. Yeah, very frugal. You know, I mean, when you can run a small onion farm operation and put money in the bank, you know, enough so that at the end of their lifetime they were very comfortable. My parents were very comfortable financially. but they wouldn't.
But never became
But they
extravagant.
couldn't part with that money though,
Mhm.
because
You never know.
It was security.
my father would always say, "When I'm dead and gone, you can do whatever you want with the money. Until then," he says, "I'm keeping it." Because I tried to help him with a little financial planning, you know.
Sure.
And I'll control the money, he said.
Now, other than the muck, did your parents work any other jobs?
Yeah.
Factory jobs?
Yeah, after the children started, grew up quite a bit, my father and mother could rely on the children, to do more of the farm work.
Mhm.
So my father began taking jobs, and eventually he got to a point where he worked full time at the school as a janitor, and then at Dye Molding Corporation, where he actually retired from. But yeah, and all of them, all of the old timers, at one point or another, worked different jobs through the winter. Whether it was a factory in Canastota, like a lot of them worked at Henny Motors, and during the winter time, they would get hired for the winter, and then when summer came, spring came, they would plant their onions.
Yeah.
And it worked out for both. I guess it worked out for the companies and for the people, because your father probably worked there too.
He worked
didn't he?
winters at CRB. I don't know if
Oh,
anybody
Caruso,
remembers
Rhode
that.
Island,
Yes.
Battaglia.
Battaglia,
And
that's
then
right.
My
Main
uncle
Street.
Izzy Reposetti's, he would manage there in the winter. But my father stayed in farming until he retired at 65 because he loved it.
Mhm.
He said the most beautiful thing to him was springtime when the fields would start turning green. So, and he used to do projects sometimes with Cornell Cooperative Extension. He loved farming. He loved farming. And although talking about the Depression, I remember a couple of stories that he and my aunt had shared with me, that there was no work, it was wintertime. My grandfather and his friend used to go every day on the train to Rome or Utica to look for day work. And they had large families to feed. And one time my grandfather found a $20 bill. And this is Depression time. And so he shared it with his friend. And because of that, I'll never forget it because it really touches my heart. He could have kept it all. But he gave 10 to his friend for his family, and he kept 10, and he said they were able to eat all winter because they could buy so much flour for pasta and so on. And that story will always stay with me. And also, my aunt told me that my father's family had a house on Peterborough Street, and one night someone knocked on the door. I must have been a very little girl because my grandmother died when I was 10. And they asked for money because it was the Depression, they were poor, they had nothing to eat. And my grandmother, an Italian, told the person, "I don't have any money, but I just made bread." And my aunt said, I can still see her with a knife cutting the loaf of bread in half and giving the person half the loaf of bread. She said, "I will share my bread with you, but I have no money to give you." So there's a lot of what went on in the Depression too.
Now that $20 bill today would be
Oh my gosh.
hundreds,
Yeah.
at least
Yes,
200 to
in
300.
the 30s,
Because of
yes. Yeah.
Now your dad, in addition to working the muck and working in local factories, he also would hunt and fish to kind of supplement the family income.
Uh-huh.
In fact, you mentioned that he would get up at 4 a.m. to fish before he went into work.
Exactly, yeah. My mother, he'd take off 4 o'clock in the morning to go fish in the Guazalone Creek or someplace, and my mother would have to get up and get the kids all ready and give them breakfast, pack a lunch, and
6 kids.
and then sometimes if the fishing was extra good, he'd forget to come home, and so he'd be late, and so she had to put up with that. But he always found time to hunt and fish. He had a big family, had a big responsibility, but I mean the pheasant population down here, they were I remember when I was a kid, they were like chickens. We'd drive down from Canastota to the farm to work, And my father, look over there, there's a brood. Look over there, there's a brood. And then the truck would go this way and that way. My mother would say, Sam, stay on the road. Never mind the pheasant. And then when we'd harvest the onions, you'd come down in the morning and the pheasant would be sitting on those 10 stacks. Remember the 10 stacks of onions?
Oh yeah, sure.
They'd be sitting on there, fluffing their feathers and everything. And you didn't have to look too hard to find fish and game in those days.
Now, who would clean the fish and dress the wild animals?
He did some of it, but it was never good enough for my mother. So she eventually took over all the chores of cleaning and processing the game, other than deer, which we didn't really hunt till later. But like small game, squirrels, rabbits. She'd skin them, clean them, cook them, and I'll tell you, I ate woodchuck, I ate squirrel, pheasant, partridge, all delicious.
That's how it's prepared.
Delicious.
She could cook.
One time, this is when we were married, my father loved to catch snapping turtles. He'd go over the canal, the Erie Canal, by the BB Bridge Road,
Yep.
and he'd catch a little sunfish or something, cut a chunk of meat off the sunfish, and he had a special pole that he built for turtles, and he'd catch snapping turtles. He loved to eat them, and he'd take them home. He'd cut the shell. He'd clean all the different kinds of meat, and my mother would make various stews and so forth. One time she, every time I went there, she would say, "You want to take something home? A few meatballs with it." They were food peddlers. I mean, that was their their breaking the ice.
I loved
when
it.
somebody came to visit or something. My goodness, you always had to have something. I don't care what it was, but you had to have something. So anyway, she had this stew made out of turtle meat with sauce, and I thought, that'd be good. I'm gonna take it home and give it to my wife. So I brought it home and I said, "Oh, my mother gave me a little stew here,
Didn't tell her what.
No, I didn't tell her what it was. So
I think you said it was pork. I said,
yeah.
I
So-
don't know. These bones are different.
So when she ate it,
It's so
she started
good.
asking me questions about, what was it? What were these little bones? And I said, "Geez, I don't know." I said, my mother. Whatever's left over, she puts together and and puts it out for food. So I made sure she ate it, and I didn't say anything for like 4 or 5 hours because I didn't want to drop it on her right after she ate it because she might have a bad reaction or something.
It was delicious.
But she enjoyed eating it, so I knew that. So I waited 4 or 5 hours, and I said, "By the way, honey," I said, "how'd you like that snapping turtle?" Oh my God! I knew it. I knew those little bones. I'd never seen those before. But that gives you an idea. I mean,
It was delicious. She
it
could
was.
really cook.
all of them could cook. I mean, that was how they were brought up.
I might have been divorced if it was me trying that trick.
It was so good.
But there was always leftover sauce and meatballs in the refrigerator, and all you had to do was warm them up.
Now, your mother Mary was a legendary cook at home, but also I remember her working around town. What were some of the jobs she had?
And this was really an accomplishment because my father was from the old school. Women didn't have to work; they worked around the house and with the family.
I remember those days.
He didn't. But my mother, as she got older, she got a little braver. So she took a job at Dewey's Dairy Bar. And,
I remember. Sure.
She used to make the French fries and help serve,
Right.
during the lunch hour and so forth.
On Robert Street across from the school.
Yeah, right across from the school. Your Uncle Joe lived right next to it, right?
Yeah, my cousin Nancy worked there in high school. Yeah.
And so she got her introduction there, and then I forgot. I think it was Joe Rinaldo at the Erie Mill. He approached her about coming to do some lunch for him. And she starts turning out lasagna and
Stuffed calamari.
stuffed calamari. Joe Leibel, until my mother couldn't really, get around and cook good, they used to have some kind of a fishing outing up north, and Joe Lytle used to hire my mother to make like the lasagna and the stuffed the calamari, with the sauce. They're like big trays full. My mother would do it at home for him. He'd buy all the stuff and she'd do it for him. And so she got quite a rep. Then she went to Graziano's too. She was more like a prep cook though.
Was she Graziano's where the Three Pines is now, or down by the
thruway?
By the thruway.
Yeah. Lunch then.
Yeah, the lunch crop. So they didn't have a lot, but they could always turn it into something, and it was pretty good.
I said something about your mom recently. I said, Mary Pulverenti, she was into weed. And someone said, marijuana? I said, no, not that kind of. But how about the wild greens?
Oh.
And what were some of the things that they would pick
Exactly.
and then serve?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so many things. Fiddleheads in later years too, they were good.
My father would pick, this time of the year he'd pick dandelion. The minute it came back to life, they'd pick dandelion.
The young burdocks that she'd have to peel.
Yeah.
They're delicious in our ways.
You know what we call elfin ears?
Yeah.
The burdock plant?
Yeah.
Well, in the spring, like now, when they first start growing, they make pretty good sized leaves, and the stem is like rhubarb. Only it doesn't have the taste of rhubarb. It just so what they would do is they would pick those plants. They would trim off the leaf part and take the stem, just like a rhubarb stem. And you had to be pretty good with a little knife to start and peel that stalk of burdock at a real thin skin, and you'd peel the whole thing all the way around. Then they would chop it up in small pieces, and they would make like a frittata with it. Cheese, egg, seasoning and so forth. And they would make little patties with that burdock. And I'm telling you, it's delicious.
I remember having some meals with some wild greens, and I remember my father would always want to pull off to the side of the road. He'd spot something out in somebody's field. It wasn't his property, but he felt he had the right to pick a bag of something.
The other was like I forgot what they called it, but it's like a smooth leaf, like spinach. It almost looks, and then when it flowers, it comes out yellow. The flowers are yellow, and you'll think there aren't any around. As you drive around now and look, you can't see them. But the minute the flower starts to come out, it's too late to eat them then. But they're there, and they're the real shiny, almost like spinach. They look. And then there's another kind of rabi, which is bitter, and it has it's a little bristly even. And they used to cook those a couple times and throw the water out, before they used them. But yeah, my goodness.
They pick mushrooms, right?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, I never made the connection until I was older. They used to say they were fungis.
Right.
Fungis.
Yeah.
I got to know fungis are mushrooms.
Yeah.
Fungi, whatever.
Yeah, because in those,
pronunciation.
Ted Lombrezo still does.
Teddy's an excellent mushroom hunter.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I mean, we'll go fishing sometimes. I remember one time we went up to Oak Orchard. It's up in Albion. In the fall, you go after the big brown trout up there. So we were fishing up there, and all of a sudden Teddy comes down the bank, and he says, "Hey, have you got a plastic bag in the car?" And I go, "Yeah, I think so." Okay, so he goes. He gets the plastic. He found mushrooms on a log in the woods there, someplace. he came back. He came back with a half of a garbage bag full of mushroom.
Now, your children, are they into any of this cuisine? Because I know my
They've
kids
eaten
look
it.
at me like
They've eaten it, but they don't prepare it themselves.
They like it though. They're into clean eating now. They try to eat organic and healthy things. But Elizabeth's going to have a garden this year, a vegetable garden. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my boys had a garden when he wasn't so busy in New Jersey,
Yeah.
but that's kind of dropped by the wayside.
Yeah.
He plays more golf than garden.
There's a lot more available in the stores now.
Oh yeah,
Than it
absolutely.
used to be.
Yeah.
Mm.
Now, the Pulverentis and the Segroys, all right, connected by this beautiful land over here. But I'm going to have you identify the members of your family when you were
Yeah, let's see.
living on Elm Street.
Yeah,
Go by the oldest.
yeah. Well, of course, my mom and dad, and then my older brother is Sam.
So he'd be Salvatore the Third, right? The
Yes.
grandfather, your father, and your brother.
All right. Yeah. And then my sister Mary,
Was married to
Nick Lazaro.
Nick Lazaro. He passed away.
Yes, yes. Unfortunately, fairly young.
Yeah.
And then my brother John, who's been in Florida most of his life, and then I come in next after him, and then my brother Richard and my brother Louis, the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, baby of the family.
And the Segroys.
Oh.
Now, I'm assuming this picture was taken in the house on Lewis Street.
Yes, the house where
One of the
we
nicest
grew
homes
up.
in Canastota.
Oh,
Absolutely.
my dad loved being outside, so he worked outside. My mother worked in, and of course it's Jim and Grace Segroy, my parents. I'm the oldest, and then my sister Janice, my brother Tom, and my sister Marie. And we had a wonderful, wonderful childhood, all of us.
Right. I delivered newspapers
Yes,
place.
you were just down the
back a
street.
few years ago.
We North Siders, right? The North Siders. Our aunts and uncles all lived within 2 blocks of us.
Oh, wow. Wow.
You know,
Now,
those days.
according to the yearbook, you were born January 16th, 1944.
Right.
Where? At home? I would expect you to be born at home.
No, in
Lennox.
was it Lennox Memorial
Oh, you were
Hospital,
born in the hospital.
where the dentist
Yeah.
is.
Okay.
3 blocks
Casada,
away.
right across from the library. Yeah.
I just happened to take a few photos, and I think this photo at the top right here is 109
Elm
Street.
Street.
How many years did you live at 109 Elm Street?
Until I was 28.
Your parents, it was the only home they owned. They
Right.
lived there
Oh.
they were married in 31, and when your mom died at 94, they still had the house. So,
Wow.
And my father
in
paid.
19,
My
yeah, she
father
was
paid
94 years old.
$1,400 for that house.
There was no bathroom
Wow.
at the
Oh,
time.
we had an outhouse.
There was
Quite a
still an
few
outhouse
years.
here.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. We didn't get indoor plumbing like that until my father put an addition on.
When I took this photo, I took a photo of the street sign, and if you look carefully, it says Elm Ave.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it should be Elm Street, right?
Elm Street.
But I was wondering, maybe they changed it from Elm Street to Elm Ave because there was always a few jokes made about the Pulverenti boys and the Clark boys.
Clarkies, yeah.
And then when that horror movie came out, they thought it was filmed in Canastota. Nightmare on Elm Street.
Elm Street, the Elm Street Gang.
But-
We were
but-
known as the Elm Street Gang.
Yeah, but I think it was more the Clarks, right? That were the rather than the Pulverentis.
There was a lot of boys in the 1 block street.
Well, let's. Here's a photo of where Ann grew up, right? 312
Yes.
Lewis Street.
Yes.
312 Lewis Street. This house right here.
But
Yes.
One of my favorite.
I was a
homes.
baby when they bought the house, and
Oh, I'm losing.
And
my-
again, they owned one home, as so many families did then. Unlike us, we moved several times around Canastota. But in those days, a lot of people in our parents' generation had one home, and that was it. So
Right.
all the memories were in the one home.
it's interesting that we lived like 2 blocks apart
Yes.
and never knew the other person existed until we were,
Well, we're 4 years apart in age.
Yeah, I was going to say you were a year behind me in high school,
I
so
was
you were
with
class of
Louis.
'66,
Yes.
'62.
Yes.
Yeah.
It made holidays very easy because we could walk between the 2 houses. We spent equal time at both houses.
So we robbed the cradle. My wife is 3 years younger than I am.
Yes. I guess we liked older, mature men.
I'm not sure about the mature part, but anyway. Now, you did say that in addition to 109 Elm, you did spend some time in a shanty, right? Did you live down at the Muck at all?
Or your
Summertime?
father did.
Well, the family did, and I'm sure when I was younger, I spent some time down there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't, physically remember,
Your dad did.
living there and
Yeah.
sleeping there.
Yeah.
Well, my brothers and sisters
Mm-hmm.
lived down there, especially the one on the ditch bank here,
Mm-hmm.
till the big poplar tree fell on it and cracked the roof.
Oh, wow.
But in fact, one of them was born down there. I don't remember which one.
Really?
Yeah, one of my brothers, I think, was. I don't know if it was John or Mary or one of them was actually born right down on the ditch bank.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, our parents had, as so many did, had their primary residence in the village, and then would, have the summer,
Right.
Yeah.
the shanties that they would use for lunch and
Oh yeah.
rest.
We always had lunch down there, because my father wasn't going to condone you drive back to Canastota, have lunch, and then come back down.
My
That
father
wasn't going to happen.
had a phone put in his workshop when I became maybe junior high age, and in the phone book it was listed as his summer residence. Because he wanted to make sure we didn't have cell phones then, and so that way he could conduct a little business.
Cell phones. I remember party lines. Remember party
Oh
lines?
yes,
Where, for those that
yeah.
years from now watch this tape, a party line was where several people shared a line.
Yeah.
So your
It was
neighbor
cheaper.
might be listening in on your phone
Exactly.
Oh
conversation.
Exactly.
yes, oh yes.
Now, our formal education, mine started at the public library because they were building the south side and then Robert Street. You probably started at Robert
It
Street.
was the first kindergarten class at Robert
Robert
Street.
But
Yes.
Anthony goes back a few years
Oh,
before us. So you
yeah.
started where?
Chapel.
The chapel, which burned, right?
It's burned. That's right.
Yeah, that was famous.
Were you in Spencer Street School at all?
Yeah.
Around the corner?
Between the two of them, I spent I think 4 years there.
Yeah, yeah.
But then we had that terrible fire.
And then over to Peter. You were at Peterborough for 3 years. I was the last.
You
In the last
had
class.
the honor of being the last graduating class. My father went to that high school,
I think it opened in 27 or
and
something.
then
like
my class spent senior year at the new Robert
right.
Street High School.
that. Yeah, so
We were devastated. We wanted to graduate from the old high school.
Now, both of you really had short walks to school.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't ride the bus.
Couple
yes, sir.
blocks.
I don't even remember riding the bus when I was in
Yeah.
kindergarten. That was it. And after that, it was you walk from wherever.
Right.
Well, my
Yeah, we
son, remember when our son, Jim Pulverenti, and two of his buddies in high school, Andy Enoch, Betty Gale Buddha's son, and Ryan Petray, the three of those guys used to go, because my mother-in-law lived so close, they would go there for lunch, and she loved it. She would have spaghetti meatballs and salad for them. They would run there from school, eat at Grandma Pulverenti's, and run back to school.
And I did the same thing when I was in high school.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Just hop, skip, and a jump
Peterborough
from your
Street,
place.
and sometimes I Ronnie Marchetti and John Robertson.
Mm-hmm.
His father's the
Down Peterborough
attorney,
Street, right across the street from
and
school.
Yeah.
John Coco sometimes. There were 3 or 4 of them that were kind of buddies, and they would come home for lunch with me, and the same thing: meatballs, sauce,
She always
salad.
had meatballs.
Yeah. Wow.
There was always a big dish of sauce and meatballs.
I was just that
sausage,
much
and
further away that I had to stay at school, eat in the cafeteria.
Yeah.
Now, in your yearbook, your complaint was a lack of transportation. I'm assuming that means you didn't have your own car.
I didn't have my own wheels,
I
right?
mean, who did have their own car?
Well, a few of them, started to have them,
Very few. Yeah.
Well, John Robertson was one.
Well,
He had a
you know,
53
of course.
Ford.
Of course.
But there weren't many. But believe it or not, I ended out getting a little car, jalopy, that my father wasn't going to license anymore, and he said if I could pay the insurance and everything, he would, he'd let me drive it. So I had a 51 Ford flathead V8.
Wow. Wow.
Well, tell them about your high school job. You worked at Cereals.
Oh, yeah.
Cereals Modern Market.
Modern Market. I was a stock boy, and eventually head stock boy.
I mentioned that many of our mothers didn't work outside the home. My mother didn't until I was long gone. But a lot of them didn't start driving until they were older, or maybe not at all. But you said that your mom eventually took some driving lessons.
She did. Again, I think as time went on, she got a little braver, But she actually, I think she passed her driving test after several tries, and she was like in her late 40s, I think. And she had, she hired, the driving, trainer, and then after I got my license, I would take her out driving a little bit, all on the shy from my father. He wasn't aware of what was going on until it was too late.
Wow.
And then she was pretty independent then when she got that driver's license. She could.
Anida, here I come.
Yeah, she'd go to Anida.
Women's lib.
Yeah, it's something. And
She did.
and my dad, he just accepted it, but it wasn't really popular.
Yeah.
But he had this little trick he used to do, because she had her car and he had his car, and he'd go fishing every day. When he retired, he fished every day. Sometimes he would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go fishing for trout in the streams, come home, have a bite to eat, and go down to the pier and lake fish.
Right. Pipe.
Yeah, and after a while, there was a group from all around. Some of them were from Rome, Utica, and they'd meet every morning down there. It was like a social club, But sometimes he'd notice his gas gauge was, getting a little low. He would take my mother's car, because he knew she always had it filled up. And my poor mother would have to take his car and go put gas in it in order to go to work.
Speaking of fishing and hunting,
He was a scoundrel.
there's a ton of pictures. I wish we had time to show them all.
Yeah, I just got a little variety there.
Now this one right here, it looks like you're cozying up to you just skinned a deer.
Yes, that's
His favorite.
Who else is in that picture?
that's my oldest and my youngest brother.
Well,
Sam,
it's Louie and Sam.
St. Louis and Sam. Yeah.
And this is titled "The Boys."
Yeah.
You got a ton of pictures here. These are all great photos. Here's one with you and Louie, right? You and Louie.
Yeah. Yeah. That was fairly recent. That was probably only about 5-6 years ago, that picture.
And then get this turkey out and back.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And here's look at this great fish photo. And it says on the back 2009. You got these labeled October 2009. Wish I could say the same for my pictures. Ice fishing.
Right. We did it all.
Oh man.
I was lucky, they had my father introduce us to hunting and fishing.
Sure.
And
Never go hungry.
Their thing. Well, not only that, but they're activities that stay with you all your life. It's not like you played football in high school or this or that.
Yeah.
Then what do you do after? You don't play football.
That's true.
But if you golf or you hunt or you fish, you do it the rest of your life as long as your legs can hold you. Mine get a little weak, but I still love to fish.
Ever skip school on April 1st?
Ooh, yeah, and pheasant season.
How about deer season?
There were hardly anybody in classes when the pheasant season used to open.
Well, I taught school at Sandy
Yeah.
Creek. There were very few males in
Oh,
class.
still
Deer
that.
season,
Yeah,
especially.
deer season.
Not so much fishing
yeah.
season.
We were
but,
lucky though. When I was a young mother, I could go to the freezer and say, "Oh, should we have bass? should we have trout? Should we have walleye? Should we have perch? Or should we have venison? Really, you know?
My mother.
I miss that
My
fish.
mother and father, they never
How much
owned a
you-
freezer. You know, all that. The only freezer they had was the one in the refrigerator. How
And
much
she
could you
didn't
keep
like
in
to
there?
eat any of that.
She used to give it
Clean
away.
it.
He'd fish every day, or he'd hunt this or that. She'd process it, freeze it, and then every time you went to visit, which was often, either whether her parents or my parents, here's some fish to take home, or here's some rabbit, or here's some venison.
Always.
We always had,
Any kind.
yeah.
Now you referenced the Coasalan Creek.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, I never pronounced it that way. It was always the
Right.
squash, right?
The squash, that's
I don't know
right.
why? How did we come up with squash from Coasalan?
Well, you know,
But anyway.
slang, but
Now, without incriminating anybody, share with us the story about the mud ball,
oh, the
famous mud ball. story.
dynamiting. Back,
Not everybody did
back
that.
during the back during the Depression, you know, things were tough. You had to get by as best you could, and some of the locals would take like a quarter of a stick of dynamite, because they all dealt with dynamite and clearing. You know, whenever they cleared woods for muck, they would dynamite the stumps so they could get them out. And so they would take like a quarter of a stick of dynamite, my father said, with a short fuse, and they would make a big mud ball and stick the dynamite in the mud ball, and they would go along the creek to where there was a nice deep pool, and they would get a couple of guys right in the creek with sacks, you know, burlap sacks. They'd light that fuse and throw that dynamite in the pool, and as my father said, it would when it went off. He said the bank would actually shake. He'd fall down sometimes because it shook so hard. And it would stun the fish. And they would come to the top and they would float down to the guys with the sacks. And then they'd fill the sacks up, split them up. And,
Ooh, no EPA then.
yeah.
Sounds like the Dukes of Hazzard.
No Department of Environmental Conservation.
But you were not among that unconventional group of
That was
members.
a long time. That was during
Yes.
the Depression. You know.
In fact, you've been involved in conservation organizations for many years, right?
Almost all my life.
I always
really.
associate you with the pheasants,
Yeah.
but you've done some other things. in terms
The
of fishing.
well, you know, I was a charter member of the Canastota Conservation Club, and we used to have our meetings at the American Legion across from the Catholic Church. I think it was the American
It was the
Legion
VFW.
or the VFW.
VFW.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we used to have our meetings there, and I can remember Adam Serio, you know, the mechanic.
You're right.
He was an avid sportsman. He had a projector, and he would get a film to show at our meetings, and we started there, and eventually we ended up with a large club on Warner's Road, and we did an awful lot for shooting and hunter safety courses, both gun and archery. I was a snowmobile instructor also for the state of New York. So,
Yeah, you know-
always close to the land. I always appreciated it. That's why we're here today, because I just appreciate the ground.
Sure. Well, I always thought the Pulverentis were synonymous with conservationists and conversationalists.
There you go. Yeah.
Let's go back to 61, 62, your senior year in Canastota High School. You did go on to college,
Mm-hmm.
Lemoyne.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you make that decision?
Well, I always did pretty good in school, and there was an accelerated class, and I was part of it. Although sometimes I didn't feel I was up to the rigors of Paul Tackerberry and Janet Patney,
Oh, yeah.
Patty DeMero. I mean, they kill you, you know.
We had
I
Patty
get
Sharp and
98, they
Benny
get-
McCoutry.
Yes.
I get a 98, they get 99, and they cry that they didn't get 100. But
Now, were your parents encouraging you to go to college?
nah, not really. There wasn't really much talk of college, but Father Madden was the assistant pastor at St. Agatha's
Mhm.
at the time.
Remember him?
And I don't know exactly how he became aware of it. Maybe one of my sister's friends or something, but he became involved in a conversation about encouraging me to go to college. I was president of the Junior Holy Name Society, and I think he approached me, and what's he talking about college? We didn't have the money to go to college. So he arranged for a meeting with my parents. Like I was like quaking in my shoes, and he indicated to them that because of my accomplishments in school up to that point, that they should consider me to go to college and advance myself. They weren't too keen on it. I remember my sister was in there. She encouraged something to happen, and eventually they agreed to let me go. But I would have to pay as much of the freight as I could,
Right.
and of course I'd have to be a day student.
So you commuted.
So I had to commute, which I did for 4 years.
Who'd you commute with Canastota?
Most of the time it was Anthony Rossitano
Okay. My neighbor.
and John Patney,
Mhm.
the attorney,
All right.
and for quite a while his cousin Janet.
Oh,
Okay.
sure.
And we would take like a week or whatever a piece, and go back and forth because we just didn't. And I worked summer jobs at GE and dye molding where I made pretty good buck. Back then just the tuition was only like maybe $800 or $900 a semester, I think.
Right. Yeah.
And so,
Far cry from today.
yeah. I mean, you can't even get your books or whatever.
No.
Minimum wage was different then too, though.
But I was lucky though that I had a summer job at GE, and of course you had to work crazy shifts, third shift, second shift, which I did. Worked with Billy Backus and Ross Stagg.
No, not me.
No.
Ross Segroy, probably.
Segroy.
Segroy, yeah.
Oh. No.
The Ross on Main Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, on Ross Segroy on
Yeah.
New Boston.
Right.
Right.
And we used to commute back and forth, with our cars, but we, I think I was making like, netting about $115 a week or something because it was second shift and you got extra money. So you worked all summer. I think they still let you work 90 days because after 90 days you had to become part of the union.
Right.
So they'd let you work 90 days, 3 months. So that was pretty good. I used to take care of almost all my books and my tuition and so forth.
Now, how about during the academic year, Jay?
And then, because I also used to work for Dick Brophy in Canal Theater.
Oh, so did I.
Dick
Smart.
was the main ramrod for Canal Theaters, and he would hire all the young kids to go open the drive-in, close the drive-ins, paint.
Deliver.
I remember putting in brand new seats in the theater, several of the theaters. Like over the weekend. I mean, it would. He would make you work all kinds of crazy hours, but he had a real short window to get that job done.
Sure.
And it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of laughs.
When I moved up to Sandy Creek, one of my rewards, I guess, for having worked summers with my Uncle Dick was I got what was considered a lifetime pass to the Pulaski Cala Theater. Unfortunately, they sold the theater, so it didn't last a lifetime.
But working a decent summer job and working during the year on and off, for Dick, got me through college. I had almost no debt when I graduated. The debt I did have, I paid off when I went in the Army.
Wow. I
was able to pay off my school debt and bought a brand new motorcycle.
Wow. Nice. Well, Carmen Basilio must have been at Lemoyne same time, right?
He was.
Phys ed.
He was in charge of the phys ed there.
Yeah.
And it was fun having him there because I was one of the few Coombys from Canastota.
Right. Sure.
And he was challenged a lot of times by some of the students that were there from, you know, either the big city or money backgrounds, you know, and it was interesting to see how, you know, the Onion King could handle himself. I was a little bit at first. I was a little bit embarrassed for him, but then after I saw how he handled the classes and the students and so forth, I was pretty proud of him because he could deal with all the different personalities, you know, and come out on top most of the time.
I went to a Lemoyne baseball game at the old MacArthur Stadium, and we sat with Carmen. And when the players and some of the other students who were watching the game spotted him, they were excited. I mean, you could tell that he had a good relationship with those kids. It was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you graduated from Lemoyne in '66. Same year that you graduated from Canastota.
That's right, high school, college.
But again, you still weren't. You weren't a couple.
Although
then?
he was a chaperone, well, because of Louis graduating the same year as I did, he and our art teacher were chaperones for our senior ball. He had just graduated from college. We had our senior ball.
Vivian Anton.
Oh,
Yes.
You remember
she's in the
Vivian
yearbook. I remember she's in the yearbook.
Yes, they were chaperones.
Yeah.
All I remember is, oh, Louis Pulverenti's brother's going to be our chaperone. Little did I know.
Were you smitten back then?
He was older.
Older
You know,
guy,
when
yeah.
you're that age,
Yeah.
4 years is a big difference.
Now, right after graduation from Lemoyne, then what was the next stage in your life?
I was drafted
Oh, Vietnam.
to the
years.
Army. I was drafted to the Army, and I decided to enlist because then you can choose,
Mm-hmm.
you know, what school you want to go to or what you want to do while you're in the military. And I didn't want to go on the draft because most of the draftees were, you know, you were on the front line.
Yeah, kind of that.
And I didn't really care for that, but you know, if it came, it came. But so I enlisted for 3 years. I ended up in Postal Corps, and I
Inspired your brother Richard, right, to get into the postal business.
No, actually, I kept him out of Vietnam because he got after I was already there. He got orders to go to Vietnam.
Two brothers, yeah.
Yeah, and you don't have to do that. So I wrote him back and I told him to talk to his commander, and you know, so he stayed in Fort Dix. I said, I'm already here. You know, no sense you coming over here and getting exposed. But it wasn't bad duty. I mean, it was you know, it was a little rough, but.
So were you there during the Tet Offensive? Because that would have
Yeah,
been 68.
yeah.
68, yeah.
68, 69, yeah. That kind of everybody got a taste of the front lines with that deal, but it was a good experience. I mean, I made some real close friends, and it was a pretty good experience.
Now, after Nam, where'd you go?
I went to Germany. I was home for 30 days, and then I went to Germany, and spent the last year there, and I had some trips there. I went on I don't know, it was AAA or something like that of the Benelux countries, and then a friend of mine from Buffalo had a little jalopy car, and believe it or not, we went from Germany to Nice, France for the big race,
Yeah, yeah.
Monte Carlo.
Oh, sure, yeah.
We were there for the race. It was terrific. I don't know how that little junk car made it over those hills in the Alps, but it was interesting. I did some different things.
So you're discharged, returned to Canastota.
Yeah.
Still hadn't met your future bride?
No. Worked a
She's
summer.
still waiting.
I worked a summer for a landscaping firm down on 31, Jim Bushnell, and then I you know, I figured after that I got to start looking for a real job, you know. So Lemoyne had the policy of any graduate could come back and use their facilities for job recruiting. And so I did that, and I interviewed with back then it was beautiful. I mean, I'll bet you I had I'll bet you I had 15 or 20 job interviews that I took. I mean, I could have signed up for
Yeah.
another 50 if I wanted. I mean, there were jobs.
Mhm.
There were jobs available.
This was just management trainee stuff?
Mostly that type of stuff, but there were a lot of them in finance, banking, and especially insurance.
Mhm.
There was a lot of them in insurance. I wasn't sure I wanted to, you know. I remember Pete Mazzacchio,
Oh, yeah,
you know,
on Charles Ave.
coming to your door, you know, a little policy. You know, I wasn't quite sure of that, but
I remember Joe Cap, the old Joe Cap.
Oh, yeah?
He used to be the truant officer,
Uh-huh.
right? I think he was working for Prudential, one of those insurance companies. He'd come to the house to collect the premium, and it was always in cash. My father would pay him in cash. He'd take this roll of money out, had a big rubber band wrapped around it.
Uh-huh.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah, well,
So you ended up in the banking business.
I ended up in the banking business. First trust and deposit company, and I got hired as like a management trainee, and I worked my way up. And after a few years with them, they merged with a bank from Albany, and they became Key Bank.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
And I stayed with them for I think 7 years, and that's pretty successful. You know, I was I had traveled a little bit in my military career and so forth, and had some common sense, and so they started putting me in trouble spots, you know, branches that had problems with
Right.
staffing or whatnot, and so I'd go in there and clean house for them, and you know, and then
Hatchet man.
yeah, and then they give me another job to do, you know, see if I could pass the test on that one. So before long, they offered me a couple different permanent offices, and I didn't really like, you know, the ones they were throwing in. Of course, I had my kind of eye on Canastota,
Sure.
you know, and that I said no to a couple of potential, and then they came up and they were going to Utica, and they're going to open a new branch, start a new operation there, and they wanted me to be part of it. You know, we didn't want to.
Oh, you're married by then.
yeah, he skipped a few years.
So at what point in his banking career?
He was assistant manager in Canastota when
Oh,
we started
okay.
dating.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we married, and then after 2 years, we were expecting our first child. Both of our children were born in Utica.
In Utica. Okay.
That's where we moved
Yeah.
there. Yeah, the 3.5
You
years.
you can't say no all the time if your
Yeah.
employers want you to do this.
We wanted to stay.
So they
in
gave me
Canastota.
a couple of chances to say no, and then so we had to go to Utica. So we went to Utica. And it was like the end of the world for her because, you know, her parents were 30 miles away.
I was homesick. I was homesick when we lived on Robert Street.
Now, what got the romance started? Did you have a savings account
Well,
at
you
the bank?
know, I think what happened was you were with Richard in church and you saw me in church or something, and Richard and my sister Janice had dated,
Okay.
and somehow we got a double date, and it was at John and Diane's Halloween party. That's
I got a
right.
picture of it someplace.
Oh, yeah, I was skinny. But anyway, it was way back then.
That's how
Way
it started.
back then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Way back then.
Now, who was the manager when you were the assistant manager in Canastota?
Ray McDermott
Yeah.
Oh, I remember Ray McDermott.
and
Sure.
Madeline Stankiewicz.
Madeline.
Oh, Madeline, yeah.
She was wonderful too.
A
Both
slave
wonderful
driver.
people.
Oh, really?
Ooh,
Yeah, but you learned so much from her.
I did.
And Ray was a wonderful man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
They're both great
Madeline
people.
was just, you know, I mean, she just pushed you to the limits, you know.
Huh.
She'd make you stay all night long and find a penny discrepancy in
Oh,
the
really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really,
But-
he respected her
But
very
you know,
much.
she knew her
So
stuff
did I.
and she passed it on. to
She was a
anybody who
good
wanted
woman.
it.
Good
Yeah.
woman.
Yeah, so people have said she was a good judge of character from
Yes.
what I remember.
Oh,
about
yeah.
Madeline. Yeah.
Wonderful woman.
Look in the eyes, she used to tell me. She, you know, she was a loan officer too. She made loans.
Yeah.
And how do you know if they're going to pay or not? You know, and if you can't look me in the eye, she says, I got a good sense that,
Oh, wow.
Oh, Lord.
that he's not going to be a good loan customer.
Of course, back then it was a handshake was the
Yes.
close the deal, you know.
It was a lot. It was a lot. Yeah, I mean, when you look at banking back then, where we manually ran all our number at the end of every day. People brought in money, people took money out, and did other things. Everything had a wash at the end of the day, or else you didn't go home.
Yeah,
You know,
sure.
and
Wow.
so it was all manual. I can remember those big machines. Now,
Well, when
now
Mark's-
everything's computer. I mean, my kids don't know what a bank is anymore. They got their phone. They
Yeah.
access their money and do things.
Mark Dunbar's mother, I remember her at the
God
old
bless her.
First Trust on
Yeah.
where Rappazzotti's law firm is located in that building. And as a little kid, I'd go in with my little passbook. I've said this before,
Yeah.
and she would record what I had deposited.
Mhm.
I thought she owned the bank. I remember one day I went home. I told my mom, I said, "Mrs. Dunbar, the woman that owns the bank," and she said, "She doesn't own the bank. She works there. She doesn't own it."
Yeah,
I
she was another
fortunate.
one.
I was fortunate enough to work with her.
She was, yeah,
I mean, in those days.
hard work.
In those days, those people, went through the original, senior population. Then all the kids came along. They did all the banking for all the kids. I mean, everybody knew who everybody was.
Mm-hmm.
And you go from that to when I left banking. You go into a branch, and on any given day, there might not be a single person you recognize.
Yeah.
Back then, Bill Dew, and Madeline Stankovitz
Jean
and
Dunbar.
Gene Dunbar
Helen
and
Fabrizi.
Helen
I
Fabrizi.
her.
Remember Helen?
Sure.
And Merriman, Lucille Merriman.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And Phyllis McNally.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
they
they were
were
all great girls.
they were.
great.
They were just stationary there. I mean, you went in there any day of the week and you saw those faces,
Sure.
You had
and they
one
knew
job.
you and they helped you.
Just like the homes, you'd live in one house your whole life. You had one job your whole
And I
life.
used to, when I got into a position of management, I used to try to stress that with my bosses, that, you don't just want to hire anybody off the street. You want somebody that's going to come in here and reflect on, the community and do a good job and recognize people, make them feel comfortable when they come in. No, you go there and you don't even know anybody. What kind of deal was that?
That's one change of the village. I mean, when we were growing up, everybody knew everybody, so you couldn't get away with much because
No.
in every neighborhood there was
I'll tell
somebody
your
that
parents.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So after Key Bank, right? First Trust became Key Bank. After Key Bank, where'd you go?
After Key Bank, I got actually recruited by Oneida Valley National Bank, the Fearon Bank in Oneida.
Mm-hmm.
Sam Joffrey was on the board,
Okay.
and they were going to come to Canastota with that branch up on the highway.
Where the NBT Bank is now.
NBT is now,
Okay.
right? And they wanted a hometown boy to come and
Yeah.
run the shop for them.
Yeah.
And so we met with them. In fact, they insisted on even meeting my wife. They wouldn't finalize the deal until they met.
They had to vet the spouse too, not just.
Well,
Because they believed in the family.
Yeah, they believed.
involvement.
They believed
Yeah,
in that
with
community
community
connection.
things.
So anyway, we got the job. They paid me a few more bucks, and we got the job. And eventually, we came back to Canastota from Utica to work. And I worked with them for 22 years, I think, in Oneida Valley National Bank.
Was that your last banking stop?
No. When they merged with the National Bank of Cortland, I think they merged, and Alliance Bank it became.
Okay.
And I had seen it first back with Key Bank when they merged and First Trust became Key Bank. I had been around the block enough by then, over 20 years in this business. I could just see the handwriting on the wall, and so I was fortunate enough because of my time and years and everything
Mm-hmm.
that I was fortunate enough to be able to withdraw from that bank position, and I was able to take my retirement because we had pensions back in those days. Today they don't have pensions. Today they have 401ks, which are just accounts you put money in, basically. Well, they match sometimes.
Yeah, defined benefits back then.
But
I was
able to retire at that time if I wanted to, and I was fortunate enough to fall into the package where I was allowed to have my medical insurance, including my wife and family. And so we looked at everything, and they wanted me to stay, but they were going to change my position. I'm going to have to take less pay, and I didn't work all these years to earn less. So we talked about it, and we just felt it was best if I turned it down.
Yeah.
So I retired basically from Oneida Valley Bank, and about a month later,
6 weeks exactly, you went back to work.
Was he driving you crazy?
Well, I was working at the time, but he was 55 at that time. I said, I think you're too young to be. But that was the year we built this house too, right? Or no, that was after your second retirement. I forgot he had two.
So anyway, a friend of mine who had previously worked with me at Oneida Valley had gone over to the savings bank.
Okay.
Oneida Savings Bank.
Downtown.
Right down
near Fire Building. Yeah. Okay.
So and they were going to come to Canastota with the new branch in Canastota, and they wanted me to do the same thing for them that I did for Oneida Valley 20 years before. So I met with the president of the bank in my buddy's kitchen, off site, and we talked over everything, and they were willing to basically give me whatever I wanted, because what they wanted me to do was, put this place on the map. Go cherry pick the good loan customers and everything. And so we made a deal, and I told him I would work for about three more years, and then I'd pull the plug completely. So that's what happened. I worked for my 3 years. We got the branch open, got it going really well, and then in 2002. That I retired in July 1st of 2002, and the next day I was down here building this house with my nephew. I spent the whole summer here building this house with my nephew.
I'm assuming it's Steve Pulverenti.
Yeah.
Now, Ann
never worked so hard in all my life. Never been in such great shape as all my life.
Sure. Yeah.
Because we wouldn't even take lunch. Work right through lunch sometimes. Steve, I gotta have lunch.
Now, Ann, you were a traditional stay-at-home mom?
For most of the years, but I was a dental hygienist before our children were born, and went back to dental when they got into high school, college.
Where'd you do your training for dental?
OCC at that time had it. Went to Cortland State a year, didn't know what I wanted to do, then I went the 2 years to OCC.
Yeah.
And so I worked in dental while he was retired, but it was great because if it was wintertime, he'd make my coffee, go warm up my car, then he'd come in and take a nap. I'd go to work.
It was great.
Nice.
Push her out the door.
I had it good, really.
My wife worked a year beyond my retirement, and it was, she asked me to prepare some soup.
Didn't work out?
Well, I put too much macaroni in. It turned out to be a casserole.
It's in the blood.
So that's the extent of my cooking.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, wow.
Both of you teachers, though, right?
Yeah. She was a stay-at-home mom for a number of years, and then when the youngest was off to school, she said, try something
It's a real
else.
luxury.
Went back to school, and
It's a real luxury for a mom to stay home with the family and the kids,
Yeah.
Really
But
is.
it got to a point where kids they're off on their own.
Yeah.
And and that was a struggle. I mean, for her especially. I mean, to be still a mom and a college student at the same time. And
I am impressed.
yeah.
That was a big challenge, and she came through.
Yeah. 2 children, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about Elizabeth and James, right? I'm assuming James after your
James
dad.
Anthony. Yes.
Okay, that's a good combination.
Jim is a mechanical engineer. Graduated from Clarkson. He has an MBA from Lemoyne.
Oh, nice. Well,
And he and his wife live in Williamsburg, Virginia. Beautiful place. And she's from Rome, New York. So I always thought they'd stick around here, but they like the warmer weather.
yeah.
And then Elizabeth is a certified financial planner at Morgan Stanley, and she has her bachelor's from Cornell and her master's from Lemoyne. And she's, of course, right in the Syracuse area, and we are blessed to have our 3-year-old grandson, Alexander. Anyone who's
Where's this picture?
We have a
our baby. Everybody loves their grandchildren. Our little Alexander, who loves to play in the dirt, so I think he's a farmer at heart.
and this is usually his playroom out here, right?
Yes, I moved the toys
Yeah.
over there this time.
Yeah.
You mentioned that your kids, when they were growing up, they had the same work ethic as
Oh
their
boy.
grandparents and their parents, right? Your son Jimmy, I think, worked for Joffrey's.
Yeah, we agreed that to bring kids up responsibly, you got to give them exposure to different things, and so at an early age we encouraged them to look for work. And my God, they babysat kids, pets, you name it, they babysat.
Like a lot of kids do.
Yeah.
They mowed lawns,
Yeah,
did it all.
and my son.
Well, then they became lifeguards and swimming instructors.
Right.
Canastota it's such a wonderful opportunity with that pool.
Sure, absolutely.
They enjoyed 9 years of swimming lessons, and then after that, they became lifeguards. So those were jobs through their college years and part of high school, lifeguarding and swimming education. So, but the only thing with that is the pool, they'd get out of college and the pool wouldn't be open for a short time. So that one year, Jimmy had about a month there, and he became employed over at Joffrey's warehouse. And that was an education.
Screening onions.
Bagging,
Everything.
heavy work.
Heavy work. Of course, he was young buck.
Younger.
More diverse.
Yes, that's what he meant.
They would kind of
Sure.
test his metal, like when they would unload the trucks. Instead of just swinging the bag to him, they would throw a 50-pound bag right at him.
Give him kidney shots.
Yeah, and
They were all very, very good to him.
they were.
They had fun with him,
adapted.
every single one. But there was a cross section of all different personalities and
And
backgrounds.
he would come home with
Which is
stories,
great.
about these guys, who had been in jail for this and who had done that and so forth. And he just got the biggest kick out of
He
it.
became friends with all of them.
He worked
Cool.
right in, which it was a great experience for him
Absolutely.
because, a lot of people, especially engineers, they just can't.
Oh,
You know,
be careful now what
they
you're
can't-
saying. All these comments.
No, they can't really relate well, on different
You're thinking
on
of the
different
Big Bang
scales.
Theory.
And I think it was good for him to get that kind of experience.
Now I haven't met your son, but I did meet your daughter recently for the first time. She's delightful. Yeah. She went to
Thank
school with
you.
my nephew, right, with John Peters. I think
Oh,
they were in a
yes.
play together.
John's a great guy. Yes, The Sound of Music.
Well, and wrapping this up, I'm just going to mention just a few of the community activities I think you were involved in. Correct me if I'm wrong. Rotary Club, Chamber of Commerce, Boy Scouts, Little League Baseball, Biddy Basketball, and I'm sure many others over the years. So the two of you have been community-oriented, family-oriented, which is cool. And I want to thank you for your service, your military service,
Thank you.
your community service. Same with Ann.
I couldn't catch up to him.